VC backed like bagels. That makes no sense. And then I thought, oh my God, 30 locations. And they just started like a couple of years ago because I've never heard of them.
Hey, Liesl, how was your week last week?
It was good. We took a trip to New York, and one of the things that we did there is I'm always looking for bagels, honestly. And every time I go to New York, because I live in DC, I got to get bagels because you can't get any. I did some Googling and I found that PopUp Bagels, which seemed to be close to where we were staying. So I got some bagels. In fact, I got like a dozen bagels or whatever, and they were gone within like 3 days. And
That's
so,
amazing.
yeah, so I'm like completely obsessed with these bagels. And
Very cool.
then I was actually, of course, to my great surprise and delight, I saw on social media that, oh my God, they were opening a branch or a storefront, I guess, in DC, like within like a couple days after that or whatever. So, of course, guess who went and got in line, waited 30 minutes, get into the store, and bought 52 bagels, which we are actually still going now. They literally just opened like a couple of weeks ago. So I'm totally
I
thrilled.
mean,
Bagels have
I'm
come.
just shocked for a variety of reasons. I'm shocked that, like, who needs that many bagels, but
Yeah,
also waiting in line and that they were that good.
they
But they
really,
were that good. You
really,
even got the hat, right?
I did. Here, I'll put it on here. Here we go. See? Wait, see?
Amazing.
Love, huge fan. All right.
So, what's the story? Because it sounds like they're expanding really quickly. It doesn't sound like a typical food startup, and the expansion sounds expensive. Like, it sounds like this is
Oh,
a well-funded
like
company.
bagels, which actually kind of are a little expensive, but if
Yeah.
it's good, whatever. But yeah, like the thing that's interesting is that obviously they're like my new faves. And so I had listened to, it was actually a story on like NPR or the radio or something like
Mhm.
that. And it said that this was like their 30th location or something, and that they were also
Wow.
VC backed. And I was like, what? Like VC backed, like bagels? That makes no sense. And then I thought, oh my God, 30 locations. And they just started like a couple of years ago because I've never heard of them. Like I used to live in New York and I'd never heard of them. And then I thought, please don't we crash my favorite bagels. So I was like super interested to find out like what is this? Like VC backed bagels?
Yeah. And what's the story? Like, what's
Well,
the story? How did they start? I live in New York.
yeah,
And so when I do get a bagel, I go to my local bagel shop.
yeah. Well, you should
So I
stop.
don't know that much about it.
You should stop doing that and go to pop. I feel like this is an advertisement for pop-up, which it sort of is. But honestly, it's like real genuine fandom, honestly. So
Mhm.
there is a story. So if you go on, you're going to kind of take a look and see what's out there in the press, the kind of the usual shorthand version of how it all started. It really is a great story. And it sounds actually like kind of the sort of, let's call it the typical startup fairy tale story of like massive overnight success and growth. But that's why we're here today, everybody, is that work with startups, frankly, for a living. We're totally terminally interested in the stories of startups and actually how growing, and particularly how they end up raising money. We're going to tell you what's actually behind the story as best we can after having pieced through a bunch of stuff online. Now, we haven't spoken to Adam Goldberg, who's the founder so just sort of putting that out there, but we have done our best to do some sleuthing to find out what is the real story behind how PopUp Bagels went from zero to an enormous valuation.
Yeah, and so this is our first episode of what we're calling Back to Reality. And it's really where we're pulling back the curtain on what goes on behind the scenes and what the real stories are, as far as we can tell, as far as we can piece together.
Yeah.
And you all will understand once we get a little bit more into this story.
All
So
right. So let's
the
go.
story is, right? The story is during the pandemic, this water mitigation guy, Adam Goldberg, started making bagels because he got bored of sourdough.
Yeah.
And then it blew up. And
Yeah.
now there's a real cult following. There's lines out the doors in multiple cities, and it's genuinely beloved.
Yeah.
That's the kind of story that, as a former founder, drives me crazy
Yeah.
because I don't know how it happens.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's true. It's like the backyard selling, actually, first of all, giving bagels away free in his backyard and out of a window out of his house, and then selling them, and then one thing quickly led to another, and the thing is where it is today. They started back in like, I think they started making bagels in 2020, and
Yep.
they had already raised sort of an early round to help build out, I think, their first like restaurant or sort of like storefront or whatever by 2021. So it was actually pretty quick. And it was all driven by the pandemic. They got sick of being stuck in the house and decided to try to recreate the bagels that they remembered from their youth, he and his
But
cousin.
now Paul Rudd can be seen behind the counter.
Yeah.
Adam Sandler has a hotline to them.
Michael Phelps.
Michael Phelps,
Yeah.
Patrick Schwarzenegger, and they've recently got an investment from one of the largest asset management companies in the world.
Yeah. Exactly. So it sounds so good, and it really is. The product really is good. But I think that, so definitely, because I'm a total fan of the product and I want them to stick around for a long time. So this is nothing that we're going to say now is actually meant to be like, see, they're not really what they say they are. It really isn't that, because the bagels are legit. They really are.
Yeah.
But we want to peel back the layers on the real story,
and
because
the razzle dazzle, and
Exactly.
kind of understand so to make it more transparent for other founders
Yeah.
who are comparing.
Yeah. Because we all do that. Helena and I are both like former founders. We've had companies that ultimately didn't really make it. And now we help other companies, other startups try to succeed themselves. And in particular, try to help them raise early stage capital. And what often happens is that the stories we see, the stories that are in the media, are these like shorthand stories of how somebody got from A to Z. And it leaves out a lot of stuff in the middle.
And this story is more like from, I don't know, T to Z.
Yes.
It feels like.
Yes, exactly.
Or A skip to T to Z.
Yes.
Yeah.
So part of the whole thing is that then if you compare yourself as a founder to those stories, you're like, well, what the F? Like, I suck, clearly, because I'm not getting all this huge valuation and like all this money with VCs like falling over themselves and Michael Phelps like knocking on my front door. So what am I doing wrong? So this is the whole thing where we want to tell sort of like more what's the real story behind it, so that at least people, let's say, have a better way to assess, a better benchmark, really, if you really have the true story. Okay.
So let's take it back to the story.
Yeah.
Bagels, 2020, pandemic, Westport, Connecticut.
Westport, Connecticut, where the median home price, as of a couple of years ago, I think it was actually last year, is 2.5 million, which is median, which means there's a lot above that. It's actually one of the wealthiest suburbs outside of New York City, which is, and again, Helena found this, I'm going to have to say it, which is, of course, where Billions was set. So that will tell you something about the neighborhood. Okay. All right. So I did the bagels in my kitchen and I sold them out of my window. That did happen, but it wasn't like some scrappy Brooklyn basement apartment or a garage for that matter. It was a home in Westport, Connecticut, one of the wealthiest zip codes in America. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So my toxic trait now and for the last 20 years since I've been a founder is trying to follow the money.
Yeah.
So let me share my screen, because this is where we start to get a little bit more information about PopUp Bagels. We learn a little bit more, right? So we know that they've raised some money.
Yeah.
And we look, okay, a venture round from Tiger Global Management. That's a big name.
Yeah.
That's a very big name. A Series A already by Stripes, who invested in Erewhon and other food startups. And then you've got this angel round. I want to know more about that angel round. So that was November 29th, 2022. Usually by the time things are announced in Crunchbase, about 6 to 9 months have gone by. So that could have been in late 2021, early 2022 when it actually happened. So let's look at
that was in 2021.
Okay. So let's look at their investors. And this is where it gets even more interesting, right? Look at these names. Paul Rudd, Michael Strahan, Patrick Schwarzenegger, John Davis, who's a huge producer,
as well as a big investor, as it turns out, in startups. He was one of the early investors in Dave's Hot Chicken. He was one of the early investors in Wetzel's Pretzel. So he has made a name for himself as a major investor as well.
Yeah.
As well as being a Hollywood producer.
So we've got celebrities, we've got athletes, we've got a huge producer / investor. We've got a growth equity round done less than a year later, or maybe based on the dates a little bit later, by Stripes, who invested in Erewhon, among other things, and then Tiger Global Management. So altogether, based on what we've read and listened to, it looks like they've raised about $11 million.
And maybe more, because I'm not sure that the Tiger investment itself has been totally recorded yet. And the things that I was looking at might be even like a year or so old. So clearly they're pulling in a lot of money very quickly. There was a news story that came out, I guess even within like maybe the last week or so, that the valuation that where they raised the money from Tiger was $300 million.
Incredible. So
yeah,
I live in a flood zone. I've had a water mitigation guy come to my house. I have, because we had to have our water mitigated. Hey. So I don't expect that my normal water mitigation guy is the same as Adam Goldberg.
Yes, very interesting, isn't it? Yes. So we asked ourselves that question. So who is this Adam Goldberg, this flood mitigation, like water mitigation, Adam Goldberg? And we kept like pulling the thread.
We went down a wrong alley. Yeah. Actually,
we went down a few rabbit holes, basically.
We were completely wrong. First, we thought it was this actor.
Yeah, definitely not that guy.
Which we thought we nailed it. We're like, oh, totally makes sense. Hollywood, Adam Goldberg, smart guy, amazing actor, Dazed and Confused, Saving Private Ryan, among other things. Nope, wrong. Okay, and then we thought maybe it was a Hollywood producer who's also named Adam Goldberg. But no.
A lot of Adam Goldbergs.
It's a lot of Adam Goldbergs.
They have Hollywood connections, many of them. So, yeah.
So who is this Adam Goldberg? We went to LinkedIn.
And we did find Adam Goldberg, the founder. So the Adam Goldberg that you find on LinkedIn went to GW here in the DC area, undergrad. And then apparently he founded PopUp Bagels. But there was a huge gap in terms of like, it was like a 15-year gap in between or something like that. We're like, okay, what is going on here? Interesting. Yeah.
So what's the real story? We had to look at a couple different sources, right? We did some sleuthing yesterday. Yeah. Liesl kept going beyond what I did. Yeah. But it looks like he started out, he got out of school and started working at Morgan Stanley in the high net worth client advisory. Yeah.
So there you go. Already focusing on, he was advising wealthy people. So he would come into contact with wealthy people and he would begin to understand from that role. And AVP is a fairly junior role, but you begin to understand very quickly about wealthy people investing in companies. How do they think about that? How do you look at those investments and things like that? So already, I don't know what his background was even prior to that, but that's where he would have probably started cutting his teeth. That would be my guess. And then maybe the next step was Wild Rose Capital. We're not sure because he is an entrepreneur. He's started a couple things. Yeah. But Wild Rose Capital is an investment company. Yeah. A growth equity company, I think. Yeah. So he has actually been an investor in the investment business, kind of like a VC. I think this growth equity sounds like it's between private equity and VC, sort of a slightly different model. And he's been doing it and maybe still is, I think, I don't know, but for at least the last 20 years. So he actually. And then in 2012, it looks like he doesn't go to work for a flood mitigation company. Yeah. He's not my local flood mitigation dude. Yeah, that would be interesting if that were the case. He buys one. Yeah, so he bought a company, right, as you do, private equity and things like that. Yes, you do. So he acquires the rights and that takes capital and connections. Yeah. So we're putting together a little bit of a different story from what the marketing story is. Yeah. So by the time he's making bagels in his backyard, he has a long career. 25 years. Finance. Like, finance, investing, high net worth. Yes. And hanging out with rich people. And he lives in Westport, Connecticut. So he's obviously been successful in this regard. He has some capital himself. He actually has invested in other food businesses, and he even says himself that he's kind of a foodie. I mean, you can tell from other things he says that he also has a bunch of friends in the restaurant business. And so he's a foodie and he may be invested in a lot of things, but he certainly also invested in food businesses. Yeah. So the backyard is real. The bagels are legit. These are some good bagels. Yeah. The business acumen in building this company is serious. Yeah. But the network
that turned the hobby into a lot of financing.
Yeah.
That took a long time to build.
Yes, it definitely did. And that's the thing that we want other people to understand, is that he has spent a long time, Adam Goldberg spent 20 years creating an incredible network of high net worth people, himself being in the investment business, so he understood how it worked. It seemed that he had this bagel was like sort of turning into a little bit of a local sensation then, and it actually got written up apparently, like he said, for his birthday, I think it was November, let me see, I wrote all this down because I was trying to like trace all the leaps. For his birthday in November 2020, so they'd been making bagels in the summer, decided to have a fundraiser and basically told his friends, and you can imagine who these friends might be, anybody that comes over and buys, like, I think it was like half dozen bagel or a dozen bagels, we're going to donate all the money to a charity. And so they did. That's exactly what they did. But somehow along the way, one of these friends turned out probably to be a food reporter or something like that. And they were then written up as the best bagel in Connecticut already.
But that's also brilliant, because I've heard, since I was a founder myself, like, oh, you should throw an investor dinner. You should throw an investor dinner and invite all these people and then pitch them. And that just sounds so icky.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. But I like this angle. Like, let's throw an event for philanthropy.
Yeah.
And by the way, you're going to get taste some great bagels.
Yeah.
And let's have the press there.
Yeah. The interesting thing that he also says about himself is that you see all the Wall Street stuff, the investing and all that kind of thing. And so he was asked by another podcaster, whose name is, I think, John Davids, but not John Davis. So again, there's a lot of people with very similar names like running around this story. But anyway, said that he's really like, he's not really the finance guy per se. Interestingly enough, he's really more, he says, of a sort of a marketing and entertainment guy. And that itself kind of strikes me as very interesting. I'm not sure where that comes from, but in any case, some of that probably informs like why, how would he decide to do something like this? And that is sort of like speaks to some serious marketing chops, basically.
It really does. Now is the part that really surprised us.
Yes.
We dove into this deeply yesterday.
Watching tons of other podcasts. Really.
Cross-referencing articles, like it was
not creepy at all, basically.
Not creepy at all, but also not easy. The path has been somewhat obscure, I would say. So here's the jump. We get Backyard Bagels. We get some press. That's nice.
Yeah.
But like,
from the backyard.
Like, I had a swimmer label that was featured in the New York Times, New York Post, and yet I didn't have Paul Rudd wearing it.
Yeah.
So how do we make this jump
Yes.
from Backyard Bagels, good product, more organic growth, to raising a lot of money and having celebrities and athletes on the cap table?
Well, this is the thing that so often happens, and I think that people often miss, is that it happened because of people and connections, very important connections. And the first link in this chain that went from Adam in the backyard.
First link that we could find that's documented.
First major link was Darren Rovell, who used to be on ESPN as a reporter. He was then on CNBC as a sports business reporter, and he's really built a huge name for himself. He's since went back to ESPN, since moved from ESPN, now runs an investment company and is himself an entrepreneur. He has actually started a beverage company himself. So super smart guy, very interesting. And somehow Adam knows Darren. I don't know exactly how, but you could think of any ways where they might have run across each other.
The story that we heard was that Darren ordered bagels.
Okay.
And Adam delivered them to him in person.
Interesting. Okay. Could be. You never know.
That's what's been out there.
Yeah.
All right. What we do know is that Darren has also partnered Tastemaker Capital. As you said, it's a venture fund specifically designed to bring professional athletes, influencers, and high net worth executives in as investors. They tend to invest in consumer goods.
Yeah.
Michael Phelps is one of the people, Sarah Blakely and their husband, other big names like that, Michael Strahan.
Yeah.
So whether Adam stumbled into Rovell, whether he knew him, or whether he very expertly targeted him to get this outcome, he now has access to a fund whose entire mission is in alignment to do what he needed.
Yes. And however, it wasn't just money, honestly. So the main thing, the reason why Darren is such a linchpin, he's one of the first linchpins in this story. Obviously, Adam is one linchpin with his background. The next one is Darren, it sounds like, is that Darren is also super well connected, as you can imagine. He knows athletes. He mentions on another podcast that I was watching yesterday that he was a great friend of Kobe Bryant, and really Kobe saw him sort of a little bit as a business mentor, and he started helping Kobe invest, essentially. So he's already got the sports business angle very interesting. He's also very well connected in other ways, such that he was apparently having breakfast with Danny Meyer, one of the big restaurateurs in New York, or one of the big
As one does.
As one does. Yes, the number of times that Danny and I have had breakfast is exactly. But anyway, he was having breakfast with Danny for some reason. Maybe they were both looking at investments. Maybe they are friends. I don't know. Darren mentioned to Danny about bagels, and because he was sort of asking whether they had bagels, whether they sold bagels at this Daily Provisions, where they only stock the best of the best, and they don't stock any bagels. So they didn't stock any bagels because it was so hard to, have good quality. Anyway, so he made Danny a bet that if he tasted these bagels, he would, I guess maybe the bet was he would stock them, or he would think that they were actually like awesome bagels. All right. So this bet was made. Danny said, all right, I'm taking the bet. And so the next thing that then happened is that Adam went to Danny Meyer's house, as you do, again, made bagels for Danny and his family. And Danny loved the bagels, predictably, and said, oh my God, these are the most awesome thing. And then made a social media post. And you can imagine that Danny has a few followers on social media. And that was huge for them. So it's a huge stamp of approval. That was the whole sort of Danny Meyer connection, which was cool. But then, coming back to Darren, his connection was that he introduced Adam to this guy, I think his name is Josh, who is a big private equity investor in LA.
Yeah. Hey, Josh.
Hi, Josh. And he went to breakfast with Josh somewhere and made him order the hotel bagel or something. And of course, whipped out a fresh bagel that he just made that morning or something like that. And then Josh was sold on the bagels. Okay. So then Josh said, you really need to speak to John Davis. And so I would say John Davis is the next major linchpin in the story. John Davis is the guy who is the Hollywood producer, but also a big time early stage restaurant investor who's had a fair amount of success with his investments. And so he has a really good name, and obviously is super well connected both in Hollywood and the investment world as well. So that's the next big leap.
The story that we found is that Adam borrowed Jack Geraputo's kitchen, and Jack is the co-founder of Happy Madison Productions, Adam Sandler's producing partner.
Yes, of course.
So we don't know exactly how this happened. I don't think I could borrow Jack Geraputo's kitchen, but he got the kitchen, and Jack was throwing a party, right?
This is the interesting part. This is actually kind of a cute part of the story, is that he was able to get on the phone with John Davis, again, the Hollywood producer, big investment guy, and said, all right, here's my bagels. They're awesome, and gave him all the stats. And then John said, okay, send me some bagels. So he mailed him some bagels, but it took 3 days to get there. And of course, they were a little stale. So when he then got back on the phone with John, John was like, yeah, they were just bagels. They were like a little stale or whatever. And then Adam said, oh no, you have to have them when they're fresh, really.
Yeah.
And so, and then John said, well, okay, when I'm next in town, Connecticut or New York, or when you're out here, then maybe we'll do that. And then Adam said, oh, it turns out, surprise, surprise, I'm actually going to be in LA this weekend.
Of course, as one does. Like, I was already going to be there.
Was not going to do, actually, but he made it up, which is brilliant. Totally.
It's all just trick in the book. Yeah, I'm already there.
That's how he ended up at Jack's house. And then from that, made the bagels. And then John, who was supposed to stop by Jack's house, because Jack had also arranged a few, I think, Hollywood stars or bigwigs to be there to try to get John to show up, couldn't make it. At which point, Adam then said, oh, no problem. I'll just come out to you. And then it was like another hour drive or something like that. And he eventually made it to the house, at John's house.
And he walked those bagels into John Davis's living room on a Friday morning. Is the lore.
Yes, exactly. the story that they tell is like, well, somehow he managed to get himself into a now there was a little bit more to it than that, but a lot of hustle but some really good connections that ended up in John's living room. He of course loved the bagels. And then this relationship was born essentially. And then John was the one starting to sort of lay out okay, we need to get you some celebrities to invest. Let me open my celebrity friend Rolodex. And then that's what led to, I think, I don't know who was the first, but it might have been Paul Rudd who then called him. But this Hollywood connection. So that's how the Hollywood thing started out. That was the story with John Davis. And so we got some really powerful networks. We got some really big names on the cap table that's huge in terms of attracting people who wants to be part of that group and that kind of thing. So,
and then great bagels.
Yeah. Awesome bagels.
A really good business plan, some changes that really qualify this as a startup.
Yeah. Yeah. That was an interesting thing too, which is like, why is this a startup and not a bagel chain? Well, first of all, it's not a chain, because as it turns out, it's actually a franchise. So maybe that's a chain, but it's not, it's kind of a different business model, really, not wholly owned, which is sort of smart unto itself because the multiples on franchises are much larger, which is very smart, very smart. Because if it were a regular old food business, that might be different, I'm going to guess.
And working in finance, you know these things. Yes. You're like, oh, yeah, the multiple on X, Y, and Z would be much higher. Right.
The next thing is that I read this somewhere a couple days ago, and I can't remember where, so I'm sorry to somebody who I'm about to steal this from, which is a startup is a temporary organizational structure in search of a new business model that will scale and grow fast. That's basically what it is. And the reason that PopUp now, when you think about it, actually does qualify, and there's a reason then why VC is interested, is that Adam made some really smart decisions and essentially did some things that turned this from a bagel chain into a startup, because they really did a good job of figuring out how are they going to replicate this bagel quality through all these franchisors or whatever it is. How can you do that to make sure that the quality is consistent? So they figured that out. They did some food science and process science and things like that. So that's, that's one thing. Then I think the other thing was initially also they started with a different business model, which is instead of selling one bagel at a time, like Helena buys one bagel at a time. Started the initial thing, even way back in Westport, Connecticut, was that they would sell them by the dozen, and like along with cream cheese. And then cream cheese came into the story a little bit later, but they sold them by the dozen, and it was initially like a subscription model in a way. And a lot of these things, in a way that even the way their store worked in DC, is to make it very simple. No sandwiches, no toasting, no this, no nothing.
Yeah. Grip, rip, and dip.
Rip and dip. And so that was
we don't slice. Yeah.
That's all they do. Exactly. No slicing, nothing. You buy your bagels, you get your schmear, and out you go. And that's exactly what happened. I went in, the wait in line was actually pretty good in DC. I bought my 52 bagels. I got my cream cheese, and out I went.
So wait, I can't get a bagel scooped out skinny style.
Oh, no such
That's
thing.
such an abomination.
Like, how smart is that? A simple, scalable, high quality control kind of business that also, because he's like Killy, like a marketing guy, has a vibe. It has a vibe about it.
Yeah.
And like super good at, like, they were just smart at social media. I'm not even, like, I'm not really even like a big social media maven, honestly, but I saw this on social media. It came, and so that's how I knew about it. Like, super smart.
And we want to just recap, like, this is not any criticism. We're just trying to pull behind the curtain of the marketing story to give a little insight into what it takes, so that other people can understand. And it's genuinely impressive. Like, this guy had real relationships, real business acumen, and a wonderful product. They had to be great. The bagels had to be great.
But the idea of like that he sort of stumbled and accidentally bumped into these incredibly game-changing connections or decisions, is that my guess is that didn't happen. There's always a fair amount of luck when it comes to startups, but he'd already laid the groundwork to have some pretty good luck, basically. And
so even if he was not strategic about it, he stumbled into the luck because of the work that he had done for the last 25 years.
Yeah, exactly. And because he then had actually an awesome product, and a product that had a good vibe, it had good design, it was cool, like it was
can actually eat it.
Yeah, it was a magic formula. Yeah.
So for founders watching it, we just want to say, like, when you see a company explode like this and wonder why yours isn't moving in the same way, you're often not comparing yourself to the same step in the process.
You don't know that because it was important when they told the story to always keep bringing it back to Adam in his backyard. They didn't go back to Adam and his private investment company or Morgan Stanley with high net worth individuals. And it's not taking anything away from Adam, but what it's basically shorthanding and sort of hiding is the 25 years or so that led up to this.
Yeah.
Which is when he then created a product. He had all these things to tap into, and you can't just spirit that overnight. That's the thing. You can't just do it overnight.
And
it's very much about connections.
And it's not to say that you can't have some of the success. It just means that your path's going to be different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like that's helpful to know. I mean, on the one side, I guess it could be kind of like demoralizing because I'm sure there's a bunch of people out there thinking like, see, here we go again. All these people have all this money. And then when they get to, they just talk to each other and then they make more money. And isn't that great? And so what hope do I have? But I think it's actually like instructive in the sense that what it does show is that when you do focus on relationship building, connections versus it doesn't, by the way, it doesn't talk anything in this whole story about how good was his pitch deck. Doesn't say anything about the pitch deck. Doesn't say
anything. We also don't know how many no's he got. We don't know how many people he reached out to during this period of time.
Yeah.
We can only track the pathway sort of backwards.
Yeah. And it's one of the messages that we always talk about for founders and, with founders in general. And particularly for founders that tend to be underrepresented when you come to look at VC funding or even private equity or something like that. Yeah, you tend not to find as many people, for example, that maybe don't live in either Silicon Valley or kind of the New York City area or something like that. There's not so many women, there's not so many people of color, all that kind of thing. And that still sucks, and it hasn't changed in a long time. But our hypothesis is that other than the fact that, yes, of course, there is bias going on. There's no question about that. That the real issue is that there's a certain tightly woven group of people that are networked with each other. And when you are tightly networked, that's actually how, especially you don't necessarily create great products that way. That can come from anywhere. But it certainly is if you need to find money, if you need to get some capital to grow your business, and you're tightly networked in circles where that actually already either exists or whatever, or could exist, then that is actually why it appears so much easier for these people to raise money because they're already in that network in the first place.
But they've often done the work to get there.
Yes, they've done.
Not everybody.
Yeah.
But in this case, it looks like done the work to get in the room with the right people.
Yeah.
And then finding the right investors and probably reaching out to a whole lot more along the way.
And also, so I think, can I just say another thing like about this whole thing about the connections, which is note along the chain of events here is that these connections were warm intros.
Yeah.
Story
incredibly important.
Like yes, Adam knew Darren probably, or Darren somehow had his bagels, but I'm gonna guess they knew each other somehow. And then Darren knew the next John, and then John knew. So that's the whole thing. It's warm intros, and so when you get that warm intro from somebody that you respect and trust and that sort of thing, then you're going to take the call. And then it's another kind of key adage, which is why this is a formula that works, and that's how we encourage other founders to use and build their own networks and that kind of like idea to do the same thing.
So here's what we want you to walk away with, and it's only the whole reason that we're making this show, other than it's also hitting me on all my toxic traits, which I love. We want founders out there not to compare and despair. We can all go there and be like, oh, poor me, I'm not the same situation, and this person blew up. We don't want you to compare and despair. We want you to be aware and prepare. So you need to create a startup that's exceptional in your own way, and you need to start building your network.
Yeah. And the building of the network takes way longer than anybody thinks, because what didn't happen here is Adam didn't create his bagels and then start building his network. It's clear he had this network long before. Then he had the bagels, and then the network was activated. Basically, that's kind of what happened.
Yeah.
So it's frustrating because many of us maybe don't have these networks or whatever, but it does take a while. And that's why we say, look, if you have an hour to spend, is put that hour into relationships and building a network.
And talking about what you're doing so that people can know. This is the first of our first episode. Liesl, I think you got to put your hat back on.
Okay.
We love PopUp Bagels, and we're so excited to do this. And Adam, if you want to reach out, or Darren, or anybody, if you want to reach out and correct us, please do. But we're going to keep doing this. We're pulling back the curtain. We're going to tell you what we think is actually going on behind these myths that everyone's talking about, where companies just explode and get a $300 million valuation overnight. Please like this and follow this and go get a PopUp Bagel.
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.